Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Michael Lehman with the International Franchise Association. Thank you for being a part of this program. We are very pleased to bring you this next installment of our fall labor and hiring series today, especially at this very important stage of the economic recovery. This series of webinars is in response to concerns we have heard from IFA members relating to pressures and problems with hiring. We seem to be in a real labor shortage these days. And as we have stepped back and researched the problem, we've discovered the labor shortage is not just one problem or caused by one root issue, but by a series of problems and concerns. And so in today's presentation, program entitled The Impact of McDonald's Workforce Education Program, we will hear from McDonald's Corporation on their experience in creating and providing education programs for employees at both their corporate and franchise-owned restaurants, and how such programs have had significant and very positive ROI on employee retention, career mobility, and overall sales. As well as we will hear today about a workforce survey they conducted to find out how first jobs, entry-level jobs, especially when paired with further education, can lead to better outcomes in life. And you pair today's program with the recent IFA Oxford Economics research that shows that franchise businesses don't offer lousy jobs. In fact, we pay better and offer better benefits than similarly situated small businesses. So the good news just keeps coming for franchising, and we think you'll really benefit from today's program. And for many of you on the program who may come from brands that, well, your system's not as big as McDonald's, you may say, well, I can't do that. I think what you're going to hear from the speakers today is you can do this. You can launch initiatives that are so fruitful for your workforce, and you'll really benefit from the deep dive into this case study today. Okay, two quick notes before we begin. We are recording today's webinar, and we will make it available to IFA members later today on community.franchise.org. That website again is community.franchise.org. And second, if you have any questions at any point during today's session, please add them into the questions box, and we can address them at the end. So with that note, I'd like to introduce this great group of franchise experts and professionals who have kindly joined us today. With us today is Lisa Schumacher. She is Director of Education Strategies and Workforce Policy at McDonald's Corporation. We'll yield to her first in just a moment. Also with us today is Samir Jaglekar, who is Managing Director of Retail Strategy at Accenture, who's been a very important partner in this. And finally, Danny Franklin, who is partner at Bully Pulpit Interactive. Thank you to Danny, Samir, and Lisa for joining us today. Thank you everyone again for being here. And now I will hand things off to Lisa to get us going into this great discussion. Lisa.
Great, thank you, Michael, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. So let's jump in. Obviously, I'm sure you're all very familiar with who McDonald's is, but just to give you a little bit of context, we have about 14,000 restaurants in the United States, about 2,000 franchisees. We have about 850,000 people who work in McDonald's restaurants across the country, and we hire approximately 1 million people a year. And just to share a fun stat that always shocks me every time I say it, we serve 69 million people worldwide every day, which is about 1% of the world's population. So just to put McDonald's into a bit of perspective. So let me start with kind of a rhetorical question. Think about how many of you had a first job, which obviously is rhetorical because we all had first jobs. But now a real question. How many of you had those jobs in retail or food service? And then, of course, the next question is, how many of you had your first job at McDonald's? I ask those questions because I want you to think for a second about the skills that you learned at that first job. First jobs are important. We all learned a lot in that first job. And to a certain extent, I think we've lost sight of the importance of that first job. At McDonald's, we talk about being America's best first job. As I said, there are about 850,000 people who work in McDonald's restaurants across the country. And we know that all 850,000 people aren't going to work at McDonald's forever. Some will make it a career, certainly, but many won't. For them, it's a first job, or it's a transition job, or it's a job that fits their life at a point in time. But working in a McDonald's restaurant provides training in work readiness skills, teamwork, communication, customer service skills, and now more and more digital skills. And crew also have the ability to advance their education through a program that we call Archways to Opportunity, which is what I'm here to talk to you about today. First, let me say that we created Archways because we believe that investing in workforce education is the shared value proposition that advances the competitiveness of McDonald's and simultaneously advances both the economic and social conditions of the communities where we do business. Further, we specifically designed Archways to be a comprehensive education strategy that meets people at their point of need, regardless of where they are on that learning journey, which is why it includes everything from English language learning through college completion. So let me take a few minutes to walk you through the programs that sit under the Archways umbrella. Caitlin, if you could go to the next slide, please. So let me first talk about English Under the Arches. English Under the Arches provides English as a second language that teaches managers and crew the English they need to communicate both effectively and confidently with customers and staff every day. The program meets the needs of employees with varying English proficiency levels, and it allows them to progressively gain speaking, listening, reading, and writing skills. Before COVID hit, classes were conducted face-to-face in a cohort model. We still do them face-to-face, but now obviously they've turned to virtual classes. And importantly, students are paid for their time in class. The second component of Archways is high school completion. We work with a fully accredited online high school district called Career Online High School, which allows eligible restaurant employees to earn their high school diploma online at no cost. Very importantly, the program is designed specifically for working age adults, and each student is assigned to a coach that stays with them throughout the program. Our next focus area is around college completion. Really, how do we help people working in McDonald's restaurant find the most efficient and affordable path to either a 2- or 4-year degree? We provide $3,000 in annual tuition assistance to full-time restaurant managers and $2,500 to crew working 90 days and an average of 15 hours a week. Tuition assistance can be used at any accredited college or university across the country. So 2-year school, 4-year school, trade school, vocational school. Additionally, we partner with a select number of schools to provide additional benefits. For example, we have a longtime partnership with Colorado Tech University, which gives our crew and managers the ability to complete a 2- or 4-year degree at no out-of-pocket cost. Additionally, CTU has articulated our management training so that restaurant managers receive credit for courses they've taken through Hamburger University. Finally, we offer academic and career advising services. These are one-on-one advising services to help restaurant employees develop goals and individual action plans. Education advising services are available to help people think through the planning process, decision points, and issues that need to be considered when deciding to return to school, and also address common questions around school selection, financial aid, what's a FAFSA form, how do I fill out a FAFSA form, and then focus areas of study. Importantly, many of these conversations are around time management. Can I work? Can I raise a family? And can I go to school at the same time? Our advisors are really helpful in that space. Advising services are available to all people working in a McDonald's restaurant and to their immediate family members. What you don't see on the slide is a product that we launched last year, which is a career navigation app called Archways to Careers. Our thinking here is if we're claiming to be America's best first job, how do we help our crew think about what's next, whether that's at McDonald's or for most people elsewhere? How do we give them line of sight into potential career paths and the skills and education they need to pursue those pathways? Archways to Career is a content-rich mobile app experience that allows restaurant employees to see how the skills they're learning at McDonald's translate into careers within the McDonald's system and into other industries like healthcare, technology, and the trades. You can flip to the next slide. You'll get a sense of the impact that we've had. So we've provided access to education for over 65,000 people and awarded more than $130 million in tuition assistance since the launch of Archways in 2015. At McDonald's, we really believe that education is a true game changer, and we want people to see a job at McDonald's restaurant as a springboard to what's next. Again, whether that's within our system or elsewhere. But we also want to ensure that we're aligned with the business needs of the organization and providing value to both restaurant employees and to the business. So last year, we worked with Accenture and completed an ROI study to demonstrate the value of Archways and investing in education of crew and managers in our restaurants. I'm going to turn it over to Samir to walk you through that process and the results of that study. Samir?
Thank you, Lisa. If you could go to the next slide, please. So at the what we did for this ROI study, it was so to give everybody a little bit of an understanding of the sort of data that we used and the breadth of the analysis. This was looked across 2,000 restaurants, which covered about 250 owner-operators. The data set or the time frame was between 2015 and 2019, so it was a 4-year horizon. And the key to this was that we looked at owner-operators that had both no participation all the way to high participation, so we could control and do comparisons across within even the same networks of restaurants that did have the Archways program versus ones that didn't. We looked, and what we then did is we broke down and we, based off of data availability, we looked at 3 things. So increasing, so the 2 benefits or the 2 calculations of the positive ROI was around increased revenue or reduced costs. And there's about roughly 21 variables that we look at when we do these modeling exercises. What we ended up looking at is the ones highlighted here, which is around productivity, turnover, and promotions, and then balance that against the tuition and training fees, as well as admin and evaluation fees. And what that came out to be, if you go to the next slide, please, is we then took those 4 metrics and then we added an additional one, which was an attribution to the impact of sales of the program. So what we did is we used some machine learning algorithms to figure out what the impact of the Archways program within these 2,000 restaurants had on sales, and attributed what portion of sales could we say or correlate to having the program versus not having the program, which I'll speak to in a little bit. And the breakdowns that we then did is we looked and we took all eligible associates and we broke them down to crew versus manager, and then participants versus non-participants, to come up with a crew calculation and then a manager or leadership calculation. And if you go to the next slide, please, I'll talk through each of these. So for promotions, what we found it was positive across the board, with crew members being 2.3 times or about 2 times more likely to be promoted had they been part of the Archways program versus not. Shift managers about 5% more, and then managers about 13% more. I think one of the most important pieces of this is the population was certainly more crew member heavy, which is great because it shows as not only did we look at when we talk about this in promotions, the quantitative side, but also the qualitative side. So what we also noticed is that through this program, there was increase in brand perception, community impact, and government relations, and that was through conversations and interviews with the owner operators. And the reason why I'm tying it to this is crew members were promoted within McDonald's, but also it helped them into other jobs in their community, which is a big social impact. So those were the results on promotions. If you go to the next slide, please. On the flip side of promotions, it also helped with attrition. So crew members, we looked mostly at attrition for crew members due to the data, and though they were 19% less likely to leave. So if you compound those two together, particularly in a job where the experience matters for the guest or customer coming to the restaurant, having people being promoted within the ranks and then attrition reducing, it has compounding effects, which had added benefit and was part of sort of our attribution of sales to understand the impact. If you go to the next slide, so there was a positive for promotions, positive for attrition, in terms of a reduction in attrition. And then, so if you look at attrition, we looked at are we reducing people leaving? And then we also looked at tenure, which has a big impact in terms of training and consistency. And crew members were, again, about 2 times more likely to stay or remain within their restaurant, which had impacts on new crew members coming in, being able to have the proper training and consistency as they moved up through management, having a more collaborative and stable ecosystem within the restaurant, because you were having people that sort of were able to rotate around each job and stick with it. And then the last and final, if you move to the next slide, please, is around sales. So this was, we found through some of more advanced techniques in statistical modeling, attributing sales to education programs is not always a metric or things that people look at or are able to look at. It was something that we were able to put together. And what we found is about 1.2% of total sales, or the increase in total sales for those restaurants that had archways, about 1.2% of it was correlated to because of the participation in the program. So I mentioned that there was the qualitative side of it, which was through interviews and discussion, but what we tried to do was quantify as much as possible. What we saw is just a positive impact across 3 or 4 big metrics, which is around reduction in attrition, increase in tenure, increase in promotions, and then the ability for the program to be correlated back to sales. So those were the results of the program, and then I'll turn it back.
Yeah. Thank you, Samir, and thank you for sharing that data and for your partnership.
Sure.
As you might imagine, we were thrilled to see the results of this ROI study, and it has really helped us within the organization and talking about it externally, the impact that this investment in education has had on McDonald's. So let's turn our attention to the workforce survey that Michael mentioned as he kicked us off, that we did in partnership with the American Association of Community Colleges, really looking at how first jobs, especially when paired with further education, can lead to better outcomes later in life. Again, results really exciting and very eye-opening. So I'm going to turn it over to Danny from Bully Pulpit to walk you through those results. Danny?
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's great to be here. We're really grateful to have a chance to talk about this work. We were really excited about it. So a quick, by way of introduction, I come from Bully Pulpit Interactive. We're a communications agency with a specialization in reputation and issues management, and working with McDonald's to understand the impact of the workforce, the employee experience on the course of their life. We've always believed that the McDonald's job had lifelong impact. We wanted to understand a little bit more how and why and what that means for what our peers can do to create the best possible first job experience for their employees. So if you go to the next slide, we talk a little bit about what we did. We were in the field with this poll earlier this year in the spring, from April 20th to May 9th. And it was a poll of about 2,000 American adults between the ages of 18 to 49. We limited it at 49 because we wanted more recent experiences. We also included a sample of over 400 current or former McDonald's employees. Of those, 172 said that their first job was at McDonald's. And we included them because we wanted to identify specifically what the impact of a McDonald's first job was on the rest of their lives. So if you go to the next slide, or actually two ahead, when we talk about a first job, what are we talking about? We're talking about mostly restaurant and retail. The plurality of first jobs in this country are at restaurant or food service. About half of that in retail, and that constitutes fully half of all of the first jobs that people have in America. So the impact that these industries have and the first job experience can have is really vast when it comes to training, not just on skills, but in the broader range of skills and expectations and work habits that people bring to their jobs. So if you go to the next slide, we can get to what do people expect? What are the baselines? What is important for a first job? And it comes down to fairness, safety, and respect. So what you're seeing here are the percentage of people who say that the following qualities are either absolutely essential or merely very important in a first job. Treating employees fairly, very important to 84%, absolutely essential to 53%. The same numbers for a safe workplace. Just ahead of paying employees a fair wage, which not surprisingly, 82% say is very important. But just as important as having a manager who treats them with respect. So respect, safety, fairness, and fairness in the sense of wages. Those are the expectations that people bring to their first jobs. One of the things that we were pleased with, and I think that would be a surprise to most people when they think about first jobs, is how the myths of a first job don't match the reality. I think people expect that most people hated their first jobs. In fact, more than 3/4 say that they were satisfied with their first job, and more than 2/3 that they would recommend their first job to someone else. So first off, the myth that a first job is drudgery and doesn't have long-term impact is not borne out when you ask people about their own experiences. Why is that? Well, 74% say that learning to work as part of a team was a part of their first job. 73% said it was safe. 70% said they received enough instruction to do their job well. And more than 2/3 said that they were able to learn skills that they applied in other jobs and that they were given enough opportunities to learn from mistakes. So you can see the experience is one where people feel safe, respected, trained, and learning skills that they're applying elsewhere. If you go to the next slide, we can dig a little bit more into what's really essential. So when we are trying to identify the experiences and characteristics of a job that correlate most strongly to lifelong success, we zero in on 3 key qualities: responsibility, teamwork, and responsiveness. When we talk about responsibility, what do we mean? Being on time, having a positive attitude, learning how much work goes into earning a paycheck. Each of these was strongly, when asked in a battery of attributes, what's most important in a first job, more than half strongly agreed that these were necessary for a great first job. When we're talking about teamwork, very specifically, it's not just about how to work as part of a team, but even more so, how to communicate with team members, which 57% said was strongly agreed was important, and how to work with people of different backgrounds. And finally, what we call responsiveness, it could also be termed as agility, nimbleness, how to provide good customer service, how to respond to a crisis or something unexpected. All of these seen as critical to a great first job experience. Importantly, there's no silver bullet here. There's no one thing that we looked at that we could say, this is the thing that people said was most important overall else, including, and to actually a high degree, wages. And nor could we identify a single characteristic of a job that correlated to lifelong success. But when you put this experience together, when people come away from their first job feeling that they took something away from responsibility, from teamwork, and responsiveness, it can have an enormous impact on their lives compared to those who did not. So one of the things we did in the survey was we asked people the qualities of their life today: satisfaction with their life, satisfaction with their job, financial security, even specifics like having healthcare. And if you go to the next slide, you can see the impact of what learning these 3 skills might have over the course of someone's life. And again, this is all includes people all the way up in through their 40s. If you learned at least 1 skill in each of the responsibility, teamwork, or responsiveness categories, you are significantly more likely currently to hold a full-time job, more likely to have health insurance, 50% more likely to have a feeling of life satisfaction, more likely to have a feeling of job satisfaction, and more likely to have a feeling of financial security. So you can see that, again, if you put these together and people can look at their first jobs as building a foundation in all of the skills and areas that they are going to need to bring forward throughout their careers. It has a long-term and broad impact, both within the jobs that they're having and the caliber of jobs, but also in how they feel about those jobs and how they feel about their life generally. If you go to the next slide, you can see how the QSR industry in particular is doing. And the answer is pretty good. 68% of people who had their first job in quick service restaurants say that they were satisfied, slightly ahead of those whose first job was at McDonald's. Nearly 2/3 say that they would recommend their first job, slightly behind the 68% at McDonald's. And about 4 in 5 agree that their first job taught them things that are still useful to them today. Just a couple points behind McDonald's, but also right in line with jobs overall, which again include jobs like tech and finance. The fact that we are right in line with the overall feels extremely positive, especially because the population that is coming into those first jobs is far more likely to come from families without a college degree, far more likely to come from families who are working class, and the demonstrated ability to provide skills and provide greater life outcomes to those populations in line with families with parents with college degrees was really quite striking. What do we attribute to that success? Well, if you go to the next slide, you can see the specific things that people say about the jobs that they had at McDonald's specifically, and also QSR generally. 88% of people whose first job was at McDonald's say that they learned how to work as part of a team. 80% of QSR generally, significantly higher than first jobs overall. They say that they have flexibility to account for education, family responsibilities. They're more likely to say that it had a good training program, and more likely than first jobs overall, both at McDonald's and QSR generally, to say it provided opportunities for advancement within the company. So the myth that people look at these jobs as dead-end jobs without room for advancement, where they're not learning good skills, where they're not being invested in by their companies, just isn't borne out. That's not how people whose first jobs were at QSR or specifically at McDonald's feel about them. A last point here that we want to make, and if we could take a moment to express a little bit of pride, when we look at the first job experience at McDonald's across some of those life metrics, we were extremely pleased and gratified to see that that a McDonald's first job, because specifically it was meeting the expectations that people have about teamwork, about communications, about responsibility and responsiveness, it was really creating an extraordinary impact for people throughout their lives. Someone whose first job was McDonald's is 50% more likely, about 40% more likely to hold a full-time job than people in retail. That 50% of them have a feeling of life satisfaction, 48% have a feeling of job satisfaction. 45% of people who started their career at McDonald's have health insurance today. 38% have feeling of life security. A third have been promoted, and 17% are managing other people in a professional setting, just in line with other prominent first job industries. So in terms of the impact on financial security, life satisfaction, and the benefits that they have, we feel that the promise, the investments that McDonald's is making in training, in education, in those partnerships with educational institutions are really paying off. And it is, as we hope and are committed to, a great place to start anyone's career.
Thanks, Danny.
Thank you.
So that gives you just kind of a quick overview of what we're doing in the education space. I mentioned when I started that we launched Our Choice to Opportunity in 2015. I will tell you it was a slow roll, but we've seen just phenomenal reach in the last few years. So from my perspective, my team's perspective, obviously the number of people we're reaching, the number of people we're touching in the education space is really impactful. The stories that we hear day in and day out about people who've dropped out of high school who want to, demonstrate to their kids that education is important, and so they're going back to get their high school diploma at, the age of 42 and older, and the college completion stories we hear, and the stories we hear that say, I'm now a nurse, or I'm now an accountant, or I now work at a child care center, which has always been my dream, and it's because of McDonald's. Those stories have been impactful to us since we launched this program in 2015. But now to pair that with the Accenture ROI study, which really demonstrates the value that investing in education brings to the business, and then to pair that with the survey that Danny just walked you through, that externally gives us such significant credibility about what we're doing in the training space and what we're doing in the education space, gives us that much more ability to be impactful, I think, both within McDonald's and impactful, helping other franchisees and other companies follow suit. So I know we're only at 10:33, but which means we have lots of time for questions. So let me look at this tiny little question box. Employer concerns involving employees at franchise locations, I think is what that says. Yeah, I don't know if Caitlin or somebody on your end, I don't have a way to make these questions bigger to see what they're asking. So certainly the franchise question, we had conversations with our legal team early on about how this was going to work. Certainly there is some risk associated with the Archways to Opportunity program, but we really believe that the benefits outweighed that risk. It looks like somebody's asking about recruitment campaigns. Michael, yeah, I don't know if you can see these questions bigger.
I was going to say I can feed them to you, or if you hit that arrow sticking. Okay, let me do it. Someone asking, Lisa, are you promoting these stories as part of your recruitment campaigns, and has that demonstrated a positive impact on recruiting?
Yeah, absolutely. So you will see on much of our recruitment collateral, most of our franchisees focus on the tuition assistance, because the college tuition assistance is by far the most popular program under the Archways banner. But some of them also think about, the communities that they're in, and is English as a second language of value to that community, or is the high school completion of value to that community, but primarily focused on the college tuition assistance. So if you drive by a McDonald's restaurant, oftentimes you will see a big window cling, or as you go through the drive-through, you will see information about the tuition assistance piece. And yeah, based on what Samir just showed us, we do see an impact on that. I think all of us right now are in this place where we're having trouble staffing and hiring. And from our franchisees' perspective, Archways is definitely a differentiator for them. I think our smart franchisees are really proactive, and they take another step, beyond the hiring collateral, and they spend time at their local community college, or they go into their local high school and talk about these benefits, and they've seen really great returns on those actions.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Does this a program like this qualify as a tax-free fringe benefit?
Yeah, so tuition assistance, and I am not a tax expert, although some days I play one on TV. It falls under HR 127, so anything under $5,250 is tax exempt as tuition assistance.
Great. And in my own government relations and policy space, this next question gets my antenna up. Question is, how have you dealt with joint employer concerns involving employees at franchisee locations?
Yeah, so again, so how I answered that first question, certainly spent a lot of time with our legal team talking through this. We know that there is minimal risk around doing this, but we decided that the benefits outweigh the risk.
Great. What other hiring incentives, Lisa, have franchisees tried besides tuition assistance?
Yeah, and I don't know if I can, kind of answer that comprehensively. I see a lot of the hiring collateral come through. So anything from, if you come apply, you get a free meal. We had a group of franchisees, I don't remember where in the country, that were raffling off a car. There's some of them are offering sign-on bonuses or retention bonuses. So probably similar to what a number of your franchisees are doing. I would say it's a bit all over the board.
Great, good examples. How have you found training? How have you found the differences between training franchisee store employees different than training corporate store employees?
You know, we have, McDonald's has a very, very long history, Ray Kroc, Fred Turner, right? Very long history of robust restaurant training. I mean, really, if you've seen the founder, it's really the basis of our business model is in training and making sure that everybody working in McDonald's restaurants, you know, knows what they're doing. And I'm not the expert here in this space, but I don't really think there is a big difference between what happens in our corporate-owned restaurants, which is a pretty small percentage, and what happens in our franchisees' restaurants around training. That's all supplied centrally. It's either delivered via our learning management system for the most entry-level training. And then as you go through the ranks, that training is either delivered through our corporate trainers or trainers within a franchisee locations, but everybody's working from the same playbook.
Great. And I think this final question may capture the sentiments of several people on the line. What final counsel would you give to an emerging brand that wants to set up a mini Archways type program to better serve their community?
Yeah, I love that question. I think two pieces of advice there. One, you really need to understand who your workforce is. What are the needs of your workforce, right? So when I think about the wonderful work that Starbucks and Walmart and some others are doing, they have a bit of a different workforce, not completely different, but a bit of a different workforce. We really had to think about who are the people working in our restaurants. We know that we have many who are not native English speakers, right? So we have an English as a second language program that's really important to us. You know, thinking about what are the barriers that your workforce is facing to pursuing their education. Certainly there's similarities there, right? It's time, it's money, it's fear, it's lack of knowledge. But I think getting under who's your workforce, what are their needs, what are their desires in the education space is really critical. And then I think my second bit of advice is, and no one will be surprised by this, you have to have support from the top. You know, I would say that Archways was a bit of a grassroots movement, but we got to a place where we have significant support from our senior leadership, and that's really critical to moving it forward. I think, sorry, I only said two, but I'm going to add a third, is, you know, understanding who your franchisees are and their appetite, I would say, for investing in their workers is also another critical piece. Getting their buy-in also, because, you know, we obviously, as all of you would, rely on them to get that message into the employees' hands.
Great. Well, thank you, Lisa. That's a great last word to go out on, and we are so grateful to you and Samir and Danny for the program today. This was excellent content, and particularly at a very important time for labor and people issues. So thank you, Lisa, Samir, and Danny, and to all who were able to join today, and for investing your time and your own education through this IFA webinar. This series will continue on October 20th with a discussion around economics of hiring. For more information on that webinar and all the webinars in this series, and to view any of the recordings, including today's program, you can visit again community.franchise.org. And please also see IFA's brand new campaign in defense of franchising called Open for Opportunity. And you can go to openforopportunity.com to see our new research led by Oxford Economics, a survey of 4,000 franchisees about how they are serving and hiring and providing benefits and upward mobility opportunities to their workforce. So very germane to today's discussion. So thank you again, Lisa, Samir, and Danny, and thanks everyone for joining. Have a great rest of your day and stay safe.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everybody.